spectrum frontiers. Riding hard, standing tall. From the heart of the people to the rise and the fall. Full spectrum frontiers. Where the stories ignite. Guarding tomorrow with grit in the fight.
Right, making sure we're not live streaming. All right, today, folks, we've got Adam Swart with us. Adam, welcome to Full Spectrum Frontiers, and tell us who you are, what you do, and what's the best place to find you.
Bennett, thanks for having me on your show. I'm probably best known for being the founder of a company called Crowds on Demand, the largest protest company in the country. So we do advocacy campaigns, publicity stunts, passionate, law-abiding protests. That's what we're known for. I mean, our website is crowdsondemand.com, and my Twitter X profile is at CEO Adam Swart. If people are interested.
Awesome. What how did you? This is it's an amazing thing, right? What's the spark that led you to start Crowds on Demand?
Well, here's the thing. When you work in politics, which I did for a few years before starting the company in college, you understand that context is everything and that getting people to attend is very, very difficult, right? So I kind of came of age, became an adult, was in college in the early 2010s, where a lot of the people running the campaigns at the time on the Democratic side, that was what I worked on, though I'm independent now, and will work with conservatives and liberals. But at the time, these guys were out of the 60s. They were like, yeah, let's get 5,000 college students out there to this rally or 10,000 out to this protest, because they were coming from an ideology of, from the 60s where all you had to do is put some flyers on the quad and students were out there, both because they were very, very engaged, number one, but number two, there was a lack of other kind of sources of engagement, right? So protests, rallies, these were kind of one of the few things you could actually do. So when I was getting to planning it, I noticed that there was really a challenge in terms of getting people out to events, particularly protests. And so I saw there's a huge benefit in getting people out to protests, peaceful, obviously, but when you'd have protesters, even if you had 20, 30 protesters, it didn't even have to be a large protest, and the opposing candidate was having 1,000, 2,000 rally goers, the media would cover it equally, right? So they'd cover the rally, but then they'd also cover the protest, even though the protest had 1 or 2% the number of people that the rally had. So there was a huge, what I would call return on investment for that, because you're getting huge earned media. And for your audience, earned media is basically, this is how much it would cost to buy the same amount of advertising as you got coverage in the media, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I noticed that there was this demand, and so I was like, you know what, let's just try our hand at starting a business around that. And it wasn't just politics, it was for companies trying to launch a campaign, or company disputes, or even kind of celebrities use it. So we had a lot of different uses for the service. It wasn't simply political. And we are not simply political today. There's a lot of kind of misinformation that we work for this candidate or that candidate. We rarely work for candidates, actually. It's mostly, when we do work in politics, it's for causes. We're generally trying to push candidates to do something or not to do something, rather than push for a candidate or against a candidate. And then obviously we deal with a lot of kind of corporate issues that corporations or well-to-do individuals or nonprofits are trying to advocate for.
Gotcha. Because I've watched a few of your interviews, and you've said that you turned down offers right?
Yeah, of course.
So what's kind of like that red line for you?
Yeah, sure. So there's definitely a red line, and that red line has changed over the years. Like I will be the first one to admit that when I started the business, like any business owner, you basically take anyone who is offering you money and is not asking you to break the law, right? So to the extent that it was legal and money, like we'd take anything, right? And we had a very Machiavellian attitude, which I don't necessarily apologize for 100%, but I do think is not well suited to the situation today.
Yeah, like the current climate, right?
Correct. So I think as I've developed and as I've grown the business and as like I have a lot more people reaching out than I did when I started the business in 2012, right? It's been 13 years. So I've grown and I'm probably the best known protest company in the entire world. I mean, candidly, in fairness, part of that is because maybe there are other people who do this and don't advertise their services, but like we're probably the best known protest company in the entire world. So I don't necessarily have a lack of people reaching out to us. So that helps. So I don't want to kind of promote it as solely a virtuous thing, though it's slightly virtuous in the sense of I regularly say no to like decent bits of money, um, for a couple of reasons. Number one, if something is going to put my people at risk, right? So it doesn't mean that it's something that's law breaking, but it's something like let's just say I mean, I'm just going to give you an example, right? Let's just say you want counter protesters to an Antifa rally, or vice versa, you want counter protesters to some sort of militia type right wing militia rally, right? Where I'm like, okay, you're getting up in the faces peacefully of people who are very aggressive and agitated, right? What number one, what does that even serve to do that? What actual motivation does it serve? But number two, um, you're putting them in this kind of volatile situation. So it's not that we would 100% reject it, but oftentimes we would insist on stipulations that might make it cost prohibitive for the client, such as, okay, so if we were to do that, I would want to hire private security, including probably armed security in that instance, which would make it more expensive and then may, in some cases, have the client kind of say, okay, well, it's actually not worth that much money to do it. So, and I'm like, if it's not worth that much money to do it, then why would you do it in a bad way? You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's number one. Number two, obviously things that are hateful, and we've never done. I do have to say, we've never worked with a hate group at any point, but things that are hateful, obviously, um and that's obviously a subjective demand, but the way that I would say that I've evolved on the issue is there's hateful, like, okay, you're a white supremacist, you're a Muslim supremacist, whatever the case may be. But I think the second part of it is punching down, and I don't like to punch down. So
Yeah.
even if it's my views, like I've never liked, and both the Republican and liberal sides do it, where it's like, you see conservative media out there at a left wing rally and you pick some blue haired kind of hippie and you kind of see them saying stupid things and then you broadcast it as if like, okay, well, that's who they are, right? And vice versa. The Daily Show and liberal media regularly has done that to conservatives, and they try to find someone who says something that's kind of bigoted, right? And then they try to pin it. I don't like doing that. I don't like to come after ordinary people. I like to protest people in positions of authority that could be like CEOs, board members, elected officials, people of influence, right? So one great example of this is, for example, like let's just say everybody has different opinions on this whole, gender ideology kind of issue. But let's just say that I was on the conservative side on that and said, hey, I really don't want the kind of gender fluid ideology in my kid's school. But what I still would say is like, don't protest a drag brunch, and don't scream at some like drag performer, right? That performer is not someone of importance. That's punching down, right? not punching up. You protest the school board head. You protest the state superintendent. You protest the legislature. Right? You focus up. You don't focus on someone who is vulnerable situation. That to me is bullying, and I don't want my company associated with bullying, even though that's
people, because you want to protest people that can actually enact change, right?
Mhm.
Not the people that are just
Well,
people that
yeah,
can actually enact change.
and people who are not essentially themselves victims of a vulnerable system. I mean, it's the same thing I tell. I mean, I have a lot of friends on both the conservative and liberal side, and sometimes I work with them, and sometimes I give them free advice or sometimes unsolicited advice. So, like I've told my conservative friends, I've always thought that the protests at the abortion clinics are very ineffective. I mean, you're screaming at these women who are obviously in a vulnerable position. There's a much better way if your goal is to convince them to reconsider. I've seen it done better, but the screaming probably only reinforces their decision. I mean, generally, when you scream at someone and hurl insults at them, it probably is going to more reinforce that they don't want to do whatever it is that you're asking them to do. That's generally the other thing that I found in my experience. So I mean, again, we've never done law breaking protests, but we've done protests where we've been more rude to people. And that is something I've found is not effective. So, so the last kind of category, because I know I'm giving a long answer to that question, is is that stuff that I just don't think is going to be effective. So if it's just adding to the noise. So for example, when you're just screaming at somebody, so I mean, the abortion protesters or whatever, you're screaming at them and you're calling them murderers or whatever you have, right? That's not going to change anybody's mind. That's probably going to reinforce people's mind. And anyone driving by is going to be like, oh wow, that anti-abortion movement, they're crazy. You know what I mean? As opposed to saying, okay, let's hear them actually make their point. So I feel that is really an important thing to keep in mind is when you show up, you're respectful. Now, respectful doesn't mean that you're not passionate, enthusiastic, and engaged, but you are respectful. So you hold your ground, and if somebody debates you, you debate them back, but in a respectful, measured tone. And if they swear at you, tape that, tape that them swearing at you, show them for who they are. Don't give them, because the other thing I know from this is the other side, whatever the other side of any issue that you're doing, is always trying to look for viral content, just like we are,
Always.
right? Just whenever
Always.
you're always looking for that one moment that you can use to, there's a Latin term, it's called reductio ad absurdum, right? It's reducing something to its most absurd or radical, however you want to interpret that saying, right? So you're always looking for that. So don't give them that ammunition to do that. So those are kind of my values. That's what I've found to be most effective when you're advocating. So when a cause comes to us that seems to violate some of those kind of tenets, what we'll try to do, insofar as it's possible, is to try to bring it within those tenets. So to say, okay, how do we make this more respectful? How do we make this more persuasive? How do we make this more focused on hitting up rather than hitting down? So to the extent that we can, we'll do all of those things. Sometimes the client is not interested in that, and of course that's up to the client to decide. But that sometimes we've made sort of public rejections of things where we feel that there's a problem with the movement, and it's a signal both to prospective clients that, hey, this is what we are looking to do, and it's also a signal to other customers to say, hey, this is something we're interested in doing. So if you're interested in doing this, reach out to us. So it's kind of simultaneously a way of showing our values and indicating the type of campaigns we're interested in.
So with that being said, it just sparked another question for me that I wasn't going to ask, but so in your mind, does what you guys do fall closer to more like PR or psychological operations?
See, I think of it as much more in the context of publicity, and that part of why I go on podcasts, by the way, Bennett, like yours, is because I do think that a lot of people have misperception of it
Yeah.
as psychological. I mean, to the extent, I mean, look, let's be candid. All advertising is psychological operations, right? To some
Yes,
degree.
of
What you're
course.
trying to do is you're trying to persuade someone to do something or vote somewhere or engage in an issue that they otherwise wouldn't have engaged in, right? That's the reason why people spend billions of dollars a year on advertising, right?
Yes,
Is
correct.
to do that. So let's be real that there is the psychology involved in all of this stuff, right? But I always kind of question is how is it different from taking out a Super Bowl ad, right? So if you take out a
Yeah.
Super Bowl ad, right, you say, let's just say you're marketing a seltzer, like one of those hard seltzers, right? And you have the Super Bowl ad, you have really hot girls in bikinis, out there, they're spraying each other with, super soakers while drinking the seltzer, right? It's like, well, that's a little manipulative, is it not? I mean,
Of course it
is that really
is.
how people are going to enjoy that seltzer? Probably at home with some chicken wings and watching sports. Probably not.
Yes.
Playing super soakers with a bikini girl. So I guess my point is that, like, yes, is that like somewhat but I would argue to defend them, they're trying to present their product in the best possible context. It's a little bit on the consumers to understand, oh, you're being marketed to, of course.
Yes.
So you should understand that, hey, pay attention to, is this a good seltzer? Is it not a good seltzer? Right? So, and same with celebrity endorsements, whatever, like that sort of thing, right? So, I kind of put it what we do in the same regard. If you see a protest, right, I think anyone should understand that there are interests funding protests, right? Um, and a protest is not a plebiscite. I got into a little bit of an argument with a gentleman from Fox News on that, and maybe he didn't know what a plebiscite was, but a plebiscite, I don't know why this was like a difficult concept for them to understand, but is that people understand that a protest is essentially a way of getting attention for something. It is not a poll of saying this number of people, like if 300 people show up in favor of an issue and 50 people show up opposed to an issue, that does not mean that the people broadly are 6-1 in favor of the issue. But I do think a lot of people in the media and in politics either purposefully or stupidly misinterpret these things, and they, like, if you're a city council person and you see 300 people on one side and 50 people on the other side, you might be as dopey as to think that that is representative, right? But that is on you for being dopey. If that's what you think, you're as dumb as the guy in his mom's basement thinking that buying the seltzer is going to get him the bikini girls, right?
Yeah.
Like, be realistic and understand that there are interests behind every movement. There's literally I mean, I don't know how many billionaires there are in America, but there's billionaires, and there's however many billionaires, there's like several times as many 100 millionaires, right? So there are lots of people in this country who are funding movements, right? And we worked with some of them and opposed to maybe some of them, right? And so this concept that, like, oh, people just like show up, right? It's like that's not how it works. You need
Yeah.
some
Right.
network, you need some ability. Now that doesn't mean that the people who show up aren't enthusiastic about what they're saying. They are, right? I mean, like, I think a lot of people confuse those topics, right? So a lot of people confuse those topics where they say, for example, like, if you have you can have people who are really engaged in a subject, but there's still money behind it. I mean, and just some examples, I mean, you have the Tea Party, you have the gay rights movement, you have, civil rights, by the way, you have MAGA, you have, I mean, all these movements are very well funded movements with very passionate supporters. So I don't think it is. So I think when I say that there is no such thing as a grassroots movement, there's sometimes people who are like, Adam, you're wrong, because I know a lot of people who are really passionate about issues. And I would say that is absolutely true. You can be someone who's passionate about an issue, but you're involved in a movement that is funded, because almost every movement is funded because there's almost always someone out there funding it. And if you think, oh, well, this movement is so out there, there can't be anyone who'd be willing to fund it. Well, some of those really bad movements might be funded by kind of evildoers, right, from overseas, perhaps. But but generally, there are moneyed interests, corporations, NGOs behind everything, and that's not a bad thing. That's just like saying that there's a company behind every ad that you see, because there is.
Absolutely. So you just brought up a good point. Have you ever had inquiries from foreign actors? And if so, what safeguards do you have against being used for like foreign influence ops, stuff
Well,
like
to
that?
tell you the truth, what I'm more worried about is people who are more adept at hiding the
Who they actually
actual
are?
source of the funds.
Yeah.
Because if somebody is like, I mean, yeah, as you can imagine, we've gotten inquiries from different sort of people, and where in a lot of cases it's very obvious that their intentions are bad, and we can just sort of reject it out of hand. But and just sort of like we'll work with foreign companies to advance foreign companies' interests in the United States or business disputes in the United States, but we're not willing to work with foreign countries to essentially either have, especially hostile foreign countries. I mean, hostile foreign countries have two goals in the United States. Number one, to create chaos in our country so that they can take that back to state TV or social media now and try to be like, oh, you don't want to be like America, right? Or number two, to try to whitewash their record within the United States. The number one we would never do. Number two would be on a case by case basis. If we thought that there was something that was truly being misrepresented about a country's record, we would consider it. But it's just not something that we are enthusiastic about doing, because it would require certain registrations that we don't want to do. And necessarily, I mean, so it's not a no forever, but it's also, we're patriotic Americans. Our goal is to work to advance America. So it would have to be a pretty egregious case for us to want to take on something like that. Um, so, but I think that the thing you have to worry about more in terms of malevolent influences is what I call Russian doll models. And it's basically, you might have, let's just say you have a hostile country in here, right? They have a foundation, they have a dummy corp, and then another corporation. Maybe some of these corporations have websites. It seems totally like above board. And then they say, okay, we want you to do XYZ. Well, it's like, okay, well, that makes sense. You're a US company. Like, I have no reason. But, and it's, by the way, this isn't a unique problem to Crowds on Demand. This could affect any other advertising business, political business, lobby firm, government firm, where you could end up getting hired by someone who's actually a few degrees removed from being it's essentially a proxy of a foreign country. And it's not that hard for them to do it that way, because now all you need to do is like, okay, I set up a website, okay, I set up a corporation, fund it, right? So then I say, hey, I'm, you know, ABC, manufacturing company, and I'm actually really concerned about whatever this issue is, and I'm the one who wants the protest. I'm the one who wants the advertising campaign. I'm the one who wants, whatever the billboards, whatever the case may be. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. You're a US company. Like, no one would really investigate that too much. And so what I kind of feel that it's a little bit incumbent on the government to try to our government to try to dismantle those networks. And I've kind of offered at points to be part of that solution of actually going deep in and dismantling those foreign influence networks that allow them to do this, right? I mean, the Chinese government for a long time has operated police stations in the United States, right? And it's like, well, what authority do they have to do it? The answer is they have no authority. But what they do is for it serves two purposes. Number one, to um, to spy on Chinese dissidents abroad, and number two, to essentially organize what we do. Like if there's some Taiwan rally, China will tell all its citizens using its police network, you better come over there. And if you don't, maybe we'll just like take away your mom's like noodle shop in Shenzhen. But seriously, like that's the shit that they do. I mean, that's like an example, but that's what they would. There's an or else to that statement, right? And the U.S. has kind of at points cracked down and dismantled these stations, but it's a problem. And I suspect that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of foreign influence that is trying to target, and I think we need to dismantle it. Step by step.
Absolutely. So, has your business made you more, or not just your business, but just being involved in this space, made you more cynical or more pragmatic about civic
Pragmatic.
engagement? Yeah.
Not at all cynical. I'm not at all cynical because I always knew that like I hate sanctimoniousness, first of all. Because sanctimoniousness, it always belies bad acts, right? It's like what was his name? Jerry Falwell Jr., the like Christian like preacher who's like sitting there on his yacht while like jerking off while his like the pool boy bangs his wife, right? I mean, that's like he's talking about Christian virtue. I mean, Bernie Sanders has like jets and he's flying on private jets and has multiple homes. Like AOC and Bernie are flying around the country in private jets. The celebrities are out there talking about climate change, have multiple houses. So like I hate sanctimony because it always belies something that you're doing that's much worse. So I would rather say, here's the system as it is, here's the views, here's why I'm trying to convince you, right? Now let's talk about so instead of trying to be like, this is a grassroots protest, this is not a grassroots protest, when there is no grassroots protest, when you see a protest, I say, are they advocating something that is good or bad? Are they making points that I agree with or that I disagree with? Rather than seeing it solely in terms of trying to unpack the motivations, because in many cases you'll never fully unpack the motivations. It's like going to a party and trying to assess, are people being nice to you because they like you or because they just are nice people and they are fake, or because they want something from you, right? It's almost pointless to try to fully unpack that. I would rather take people at face value and say, okay, they're being nice. I'm going to kind of trust but verify. Um, so that's my take. Is I'm not at all cynical about it. I'm far more cynical about people who claim that they're pure, because that's just not a thing. Like I
Yeah,
said,
that
every
right. Yeah.
televangelist for every televangelist, there's a pool boy. For every socialist, there's a vacation home.
Yes. Yes. So, how do you see the protest, and I'll call it the protest industry, right? Um, like evolve in the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see this going?
Well, I hope in a good direction. I will preview something that is going to be released soon, which is a set of values that I want protesters to agree to, but I also want authorities to agree to. Because one of the challenges that I think is out there right now is left wing district attorneys crack down harsh on right wing protesters and let left wing protesters off, and vice versa, right? Like a couple examples that I have is, for example, the BLM riots in 2020, right? The left wing district attorneys mostly allowed people to destroy cities, and very, very few people were punished, and those that were got basically misdemeanors, right? Conversely, there was protests in Georgia, Atlanta, by left wing protesters of the like a police training facility, and they literally were the Republican Attorney General was trying to lock these people up for 20 years because some people did some acts of violence, and I'm like, no, 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 this is unacceptable. There has to be a difference between calling someone like a domestic terrorist and saying, oh, we'll let you off with a ticket if or not at all, right? Like there has to be like a common set of regulations that guide authorities and protesters that are content neutral, right? Because this United States, we're content neutral, right? We should have rules that are content neutral, where if you vandalize a building, there should be a punishment. If you are violent, there should be a harsh punishment. If you block off streets, there should be a punishment, right? But if you're there to peacefully protest, your right must be not only protected, but facilitated by law enforcement. In fact, it's actually law enforcement has a duty to facilitate your right to protest and protect you from people who would interfere with that right to protest. Even if that, by the way, and that should be the case, even if you are a neo-Nazi protester, KKK protesters, law enforcement owes you the ability to peacefully demonstrate for your cause, even if it's heinous, right? And that is it's a part that I think my European friends don't love about the United States, but it's a part that I think enshrines actual free speech in the United States as opposed to fake free speech. And if you look at what's happening over the pond in Britain, right, where people are being, there's like a comedian arrest. I mean, like, and I'm not in any way endorsing. I mean, I know the gentleman. I used to watch that show. I actually grew up in Ireland, so I used to watch this show, Father Ted. It's a very, very funny show, slightly politically incorrect. So the guy who created this like television show posted some, I will say, very offensive tweets. I'm not gonna, I don't endorse what he posted, but it's a tweet. Like he's not, and then they're saying it's inciting violence. They had 5 police officers armed escort him off the plane. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, but I also think it's very important to condemn what is going on currently right now in the United States, where I think in this current environment, after kind of last week's kind of heinous attack on conservative activist Charlie Kirk, which should be condemned in all unequivocally. Like, personally, I think people should condemn all political violence unequivocally, right? Like, there should not be ever like a but or but this person was bad, but no, I think it should be condemned. But the only thing that I would say is that I think it should be condemned regardless. Before you even know who was the perpetrator, you should say this is bad, right? Whether it was and I think it's unfortunate that I think a lot of liberals, I think, were upset, I think, because they feel that when Nancy Pelosi's husband was attacked and when the Minnesota speaker was attacked, that conservatives made light of those attacks on Democrats, and then we're expecting complete solemnity here. But I think that just because Trump did not take those issues seriously does not mean that that everyone should not full on condemn all political violence. So that's number one. But I think where I was getting to this is, I think that conservatives have stood the line against cancel culture, but now I'm seeing this rush by conservatives to say, oh, we're going to put a list of people who, now, I think if you were actively celebrating a murder, that is grounds for cancellation. You should be fired if you're celebrating a murder. But if you're contextualizing something, or you're critiquing the views of this individual, you may disagree with that, but that is not grounds for cancellation. So I think that we have to be wary of, there's the woke left, but also the woke right. I call it the woke right because essentially what the cancel culture is saying this tweet, this statement hurt our feelings, and therefore we demand that they be excluded from public life, not because of an action, but because they hurt our feelings, right? And that's what woke leftists believe. And I think that that the right should be more mature about it. So again, because I think cancel culture is just truly a scourge. Um, and but the thing is, and once you cancel somebody, it actually radicalizes them even further. And you're so instead of trying to exclude people from public life who say things that hurt your feelings, I think there's in many cases, not all cases, I think there are people who are probably unredeemable, but there are cases where you can have conversations with people and actually share with them why you were hurt by it
Yeah.
and come to some reasonable understanding.
Yeah. Civil discourse is a skill that is lacking in
Yeah,
this country. So it's people need to. It's what I tell my kids. I'm like, and folks that I've that have worked for me and whatnot, and I say, you can say whatever you want, but you have to be able to face the consequences of what you say. And
yes,
at the end of the day, um, maybe you need to check yourself and not be so emotional whenever you decide to make these statements,
that
because
I
there is a thing is just because you can doesn't mean you should. So at the end of the right.
and I guess my only corollary, my only challenge with that is I think if you're a politician or you're a CEO, you're a public figure, that is a very reasonable expectation. The challenge is today, it feels like everyone is being subjected to the same standards of public figures, right? So, this idea of like, hey, if I'm a politician and I post something horribly offensive, yeah, like that's on me. Like, you should, as a politician, you should know better than to post the first thing that your id comes up with.
Yeah.
However, if you're an ordinary person, like a lot of these people being canceled are people who have like 100 followers on Twitter. They're like a flight attendant at like Delta Airlines or something. Like why do they have to know that? You see what I'm saying?
No, I absolutely do.
you host a podcast. I mean, I've probably done 10,000 media bits in my
Yeah.
life. So like it's reasonable. Like if it were me, like I would say, yeah, like I don't just post the first thing that comes to my head, right?
Yes.
Um, but is it really reasonable to put that onus on people who don't have any training in media and whatever? It's like that they're now a CEO, so it's like a flight attendant at Delta is now being subjected to the same essentially like rules and burdens as the CEO of Delta.
What we're finding is that yes, they do.
Yeah,
And we can debate that whether it's should be or shouldn't be, but at the end of it is, and
yeah,
people are losing their jobs for everything they're saying. So with that
yeah.
being said, people need to catch this is where we're at
This is
right
where
now.
we're at. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I mean, and that's part
Yeah,
of being pragmatic is saying, hey, we can. I completely condemn that, but on the other hand, I do advise people and even like executives or something. If you're someone like, be careful about even what you write in like a chat board or like a group
absolutely.
thread, because these things can. Because the other thing is, what will be posted is never going to be the full context of your remarks too. So you also have to be careful that what you may say give like 3 paragraphs of a more nuanced opinion, and what may be posted on this some stupid like cancel culture thread is like the
Yes.
2 sentences that you say that may offend people the most. But yeah, it's true. So it almost it does make me feel that, and we've done this a lot, by the way, for conservative customers, but now it makes me think that I'm going to have to start doing it for liberal customers. Of what I do is what's called cancel culture vulnerability assessment. So
Yes.
what I would
That
do
sounds amazing.
customers under the Biden administration was regularly assess. I'd be like, where are you vulnerable? If I was trying to cancel you today, what would I hit? What are the softest targets in your life? Your board memberships, your philanthropic memberships, your business relationships. Where would a cancel culture mob go, right? And now it really does get me to think right now that I need to start doing this for my liberal clients, of assessing where would a conservative cancel culture mob go to try to
Yeah.
destroy you, right? But I think it's so unfortunate that we're even there. But it is important to be nonetheless realistic that, hey, this is where we're at. And you know this is my kind of opinion, is that I worry about escalation. It's like, it's the same thing what I say about government overreach, is that they're never going to give you back power, right? So Bush administration had the Patriot Act, right, which allowed the FBI to go after, innocent Muslims, right? And they would actually, the FBI would radicalize the Muslims and then arrest them, right? Which is like you take someone who's just pretty low IQ, like 80, 90, like Forrest Gump level IQ, who's easy to radicalize, right? You radicalize them and then you arrest them and you say, we got him, right?
Yeah, and that's happened a lot, not
Now,
just in the Muslim community, and a whole bunch of different
and
communities. It's
Biden used it
unbelievable.
against conservatives. And Biden used this against conservatives, right? Where this, for example, my understanding, and I do sincerely apologize if I am misinterpreting, but my understanding of the Gretchen Whitmer situation was some of those people were
Yes, very similar.
encouraged, where they're like very low IQ kind of individuals, very persuadable, right? And the FBI essentially got them to do this, right? So these were just sort of dumb people saying dumb things on the internet, and then the FBI essentially persuaded them to do it. So I really hate this entrapment thing, but each party, the Bush administration used it, then Biden. So it'll always be weaponized, whatever you create. So just like the liberal cancel culture is being weaponized against the left now, whatever, it's like what is it? The Frankenstein. If you create a monster, that monster will be used against you, right?
Against everyone.
Yeah. So that's my take, is that so that's why I always say, don't let in more government, don't let in more assaults on free speech, because it's very hard to get that back.
Well,
So
we're instituting our own assaults on free speech, frankly,
yeah,
as opposing sides. I mean, we are self-regulating at this point, where
yes,
it's like, well, you said this, or well, you said that. It's
yes.
the whataboutisms.
I hate whataboutism.
It's that is not a platform to stand on.
No,
Is
it's
not
not.
what the other guy did. So yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah, well, I think we want actual free speech where I don't mind if
Yeah,
you say things that are offensive to me. That's the thing. That's the difference. Like if you're
I'm
like,
like that too.
if it's offensive, I would rather try to convince you to change your mind. As Mr. Kirk spent a lot of his life doing. And it's interesting. I will say, I actually did not know that much about like how powerful his movement was. I knew he was like quite influential, but I didn't realize quite the extent of it until I was listening to, and I give him credit for a few things. Number one, he listened to people. So a lot of times when you have debates, it's just an excuse to let someone say one sentence and then try to like rip them apart. He would let his detractors make some really dumb statements. Like he'd let them speak for like 5 minutes uninterrupted and really make a case for their argument, which
Well,
I
he'd
think,
like walk them through it too.
yeah,
That's the other
he'd
thing.
help them. He'd be like, by the way, look at your notes. Like, I mean, I thought it was brilliant that the way he argued, even though I'm very much like, I don't endorse all of his views, but I love the fact that he did that. Listen to them. He would rarely, like, I don't think he ever made like, there were a lot of cheap shots that he probably could have made about the person's appearance, about like how they looked, right, or they sounded, and he didn't take that route. He really argued with them on the substance. So, and again, I mean, I'm not trying to like I'm not someone who hero worships people at all, and I think that I always resist that. But I will say that in terms of that of debate, as someone who likes to debate, I respect that he did those two things. He let his opponent speak, and he never, or I don't believe he ever came after them personally. He would come after their views, maybe call them ill-informed, but he would not essentially say that bully them even when he well could have. And so that it's really similar to my idea what I said very much at the start of our conversation, where I agree with him that I don't want to bully someone. You know what I mean? I want to let them. I want to convince the people who are vulnerable can be convinced, because if Charlie Kirk had humiliated those people, right? Think about it this way: one of the reasons why I think he was so effective is even people who argued with him didn't hate him. There were plenty of people who argued with him on the far left, even, who have been interviewed in the past week and have said, "I really respected the man,"
Yeah.
right?
Right.
But if he had humiliated them and called them fat and stupid,
All this stuff, right?
whatever, there's probably a lot of
Just
things he
gross.
could have said to them to make fun of them, and he didn't do that, because when someone does that to you, you're not there. There's nothing they can do to
You
convince you.
lose absolute credibility.
Yeah,
To me, I mean, I hear it or I see it and I'm like, no, this is
it's really
gross.
it's a good lesson that and this is what I like to consider I'm in, is the business of persuasion. Like, that's what we're in, and that's what I like to do, and that's the fun part of what we do, is persuading people, not yelling at people.
Yeah, and I think the big thing that like I push, and one of the things I like to do with this podcast is I just want people to educate themselves. Like if people scream about so many things that they just don't understand. They
Yes,
just don't understand that not there's not too many things. There are a few. There's not too many things that are black and white. There's a lot of gray and so much stuff.
yes.
And you know what, too? It's also okay to disagree with someone, even at the end. Nobody has to win in an argument.
Yes, and you rarely will. You rarely will, as long as everyone has the chance to say their points. And there are a lot of times where I can be convinced, right? Like,
Right.
like I can be convinced to favor one thing or another thing, right? And by power of persuasion, right? Like, I used to be someone who thought, hey, our prison, and I still do think our prison industrial complex is very flawed, and I have major problems with it. But but I used to be more on the side of, hey, we want to reform things more. But now, once we've actually seen the effects of that, which is our streets have become very unsafe. People are not safe, and you have people who are truly mentally ill out on the street. I think we have to roll back, right? So I feel that if you can't learn from experience and evidence, then that's not a good thing.
Yeah, we yes. I absolutely agree. Absolutely
So
agree.
people should try to learn from that, and at any rate, like, to kind of bring this conversation full circle, Bennett, is my goal, and what we do is to be a outside the box publicity company. I mean, it's of course naturally outside the box. I mean, if you're hiring protesters, you're already kind of looking outside the box. um and what we do is we help causes get attention, companies get attention in an unconventional but respectful way. And we want to be really kind of effective advocates. Like, I want the people to be brand ambassadors for the cause and a catalyst, not psyops, but a catalyst. So where we start kick something off, because there's so many companies, causes, and candidates that basically languish in obscurity, that actually have a great product that just no one has heard of, right? And that if people were to know about it, they would be really engaged. So sometimes you need a movement like ours to actually get that attention, so that it actually catalyzes. So
Yeah.
that's the way I see my business: not manipulating, not deceiving, but catalyzing.
Yeah, that's how I was. That was the question I was going to ask. If history remembers crowds on demand, how do you want it remembered?
I hope that we're remembered for the awesome campaigns that we do, and for catalyzing change in a positive way, not for manipulating. But I'm only 34, so I have a lot of years left, hopefully, doing this. So I part of going on podcasts is to kind of let people know that this is what I'm trying to do with my company.
Absolutely.
And and that this is what I'm working on, and hold me accountable if you feel like I'm not doing it. You know what I mean? Like, let me know if you feel like we're taking on cases or causes where we are manipulating instead of catalyzing. But I think what we're doing, what we really serve to do, is catalyze, and as an unconventional advocates, and that's my vision for this decade.
Love it. So again, thank you for coming on, and just tell people where they can find you again.
Sure. www.crowdsondemand.com. And then if you want to follow me on Twitter, X, it's at CEO Adam Swart, CEO Adam SWART.
Pleasure, Adam. Thank you very much.
Bennett, this was fun.
Carry the fire through shadows and storm. Voices of yesterday guiding us on. Echoes of duty, the call we still hear. Building tomorrow with courage, not fear. Stand your ground, keep the watch through the night. Guarding tomorrow where freedom's alight. Through every trial, the truth will endure. Full spectrum frontiers, steady and sure. From fields of the past to horizons unknown, the seeds that we plant are the future we own. Stories of valor, of lessons we've learned, a legacy carried, a torch ever burned. Stand